In a quiet village, a young woman uncovers a horrifying truth about her father's dark past. Her life is turned upside down when she learns that her father, a wealthy and influential man, had forced an innocent young girl into an abusive marriage, all to settle a gambling debt. As she confronts him, the shocking revelation comes too late. Her father's cruelty has a devastating price. The birth of a child with 3 heads sends her father into a spiral of guilt and fear. What follows is a tragic twist that will leave everyone questioning the cost of power and revenge. Friends, today we are going to tell you a story about a Hafiza Quran virgin girl. A tale so powerful that you will fall into prostration upon hearing it. This story is about a Hafiza girl who gave birth to a child with 3 heads. You need to understand who was at fault in this situation. Was it the Hafiza girl or someone else? To find out, make sure to listen to this story until the end. This story is narrated by a girl who witnessed this incident with her own eyes. My name is Hurain, and the story I am about to tell you is not from someone else's house, but a painful tale from my own home. I was an FSC student, and my father had enrolled me in a very good college in the city. I was from a village, and our village had a lot of land. My father was very well known in the village. As soon as I completed my FSC, my father insisted that I should return to the village and spend some time there. Since I preferred city life, I didn't visit the village much, and I had no idea what the village environment was like. But this time, I was going with my father, and he seemed very happy. On the way, my father told me that one of my friends would be coming to stay with us so that I wouldn't feel lonely. Hearing this, I was surprised and said, "Father, I don't have any friends here. All my friends are from the city." My father smiled and said, "I invited a girl to stay with you so that your heart stays at ease. She is very beautiful and sweet." I was glad that while I stayed in the village, I would have company. When we reached the Haveli, it felt eerily quiet. My father called for the girl, and I sensed anger in his voice, as if he were calling her in frustration. As soon as she appeared, I was astonished. My father was introducing her as my friend, but she was much younger than me, probably around 15 years old, while I was 18 at that time. I said to my father, "Father, are you talking about this girl? She is so young." My father replied, "So what if she's young? She is mature. Her name is Rabia, and she will stay with you from now on. She will keep you company and do all your work." Hearing this, I was further astonished. I said, "Father, why will she do my work? I can manage everything myself. When I was staying in the hostel in the city, I did everything by myself." My father said sternly, "I have decided, so it's final. Rabia will do all your work, and you will not lift a finger. It's been so long since you've been to the village. Are you expecting to be put to work? That's why I brought her here, to spare you the trouble." After my father left, I went to Rabia, who seemed very nervous. I asked her, "Who are you? Are you from this village?" She just nodded without speaking, clearly frightened. Then, when I went to my room, she brought me tea. When I saw her doing this, I immediately stopped her and explained, "Father handles all the affairs of the village, so his demeanor can be harsh. But you shouldn't take his words to heart." I had barely finished speaking when she quickly ran out. There was a small quarter next to our Haveli, a place I was not allowed to go. One day, I happened to glance over and saw my father coming out of the quarter. He seemed extremely angry. Seeing this, I rushed into the quarter and found Rabia crying uncontrollably. The entire quarter was echoing with her sobs. I wondered what had happened to her, and it seemed like my father must have scolded her. I rushed to her side and asked, "Rabia, what happened? Are you okay? Did father scold you?" She quickly replied, No, it's not like that. The Sahib Ji didn't say anything to me. He was just saying that I'm not taking good care of the little lady." She called me little lady, and I smiled, replying, "Look, if you want to leave, you can. I won't have a problem with it. I'll talk to Father and ask him to send you back." Hearing this, Rabia became anxious and said, "No, no, please don't do that. Because of you, Sahib Ji gets angry with me. Please don't tell him anything, or he'll be even more upset with me." I took her words as the truth, but Rabia was lying to me. I could see a red mark on her neck, and the ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. I realized Rabia was hiding something from me. I became extremely worried. The next day, I decided to talk to my father about it. But before I could, I went to him and said, "Father, didn't you get too angry with Rabia, Father?" At that moment, my father was drinking tea and began to look at me carefully before asking, "What happened? Did you say something to Rabia, or did she tell you something?" I replied, No, it's nothing like that. But actually, Rabia is under a lot of mental pressure. I want you to send her back." Father, now visibly angry, said, "Fine, I will make her understand. This time I will make sure she listens to me." Saying this, he stood up, and I rushed after him. I knew for sure that he was going back to Rabia again. I said, "Please don't do that. This poor girl hasn't done anything wrong. Why are you so angry with her?" I couldn't understand why Father was so angry with Rabia. But soon I received news that shattered me completely. A few days later, Rabia suddenly got a fever and didn't come to the Haveli. I became extremely worried. Father then told me, "Look, don't make Rabia work now. You should do it yourself. You've had enough rest for 2 months. I brought Rabia here so you could rest. But now it's time to get back to work." I was shocked by his words because, before this, Father would never let me lift a finger. Now, he was saying such things. I became suspicious. Rabia had never come to the Haveli. She always stayed in the quarter. One day, when I secretly went to the quarter, Rabia looked very ill. She was lying in bed, and when I saw her, she appeared to be in a strange condition. Her body was slightly swollen, and I wondered what had happened to her. I felt as though she had fallen sick. I quickly checked her fever and asked, "Rabia, what happened to you? Why haven't you come to the Haveli for so many days? I missed you. That's why I came to see you." Rabia responded, "I'm just a little sick, BBG." I became anxious and quickly said, "Let's go to the doctor." Rabia replied, No, Sahib Ji already took me to the doctor." This surprised me because Father had not told me anything about it. I asked her, "What did the doctor say?" Rabia replied, "He said I should get some tests done, but I don't know what the reports say. Sahib Ji says I need a lot of rest." She stared at me with empty eyes, but as soon as she glanced at the clock, she said, "Please, go now. I need to rest." I saw that it was midnight, but I told her, "I want to stay with you a little longer and talk to you." Rabia quickly responded, No, BBG, I'm really sleepy. Please go now." I felt that there was no reason for me to stay any longer, so I left, but I couldn't stop thinking about what was going on with Rabia. A few days later, I decided to visit her again to check on her. As I entered the quarter, she was possibly in the washroom. As I was about to leave, my eyes fell on a report. I don't know why, but despite myself, I picked it up and started reading it. What I read made the ground slip from beneath my feet. Rabia was pregnant. This revelation made my senses spin. I couldn't understand what was going on with Rabia and who the father of the child could be. I quickly returned to the Haveli, overwhelmed with worry. Father always asked me if I was troubled, but I kept telling him, No, it's nothing. Now, I needed to find out about Rabia's family, who they were, where they lived. Until I found out, I wouldn't be able to live in peace. Rabia worked in our Haveli. She never went anywhere else, so how could she be pregnant? I had to uncover the truth. Sometimes, All my suspicion was directed at my father, but then I would scold myself, "Hurain, why are you doubting your father?" My mother had passed away when I was only 4 years old. I had never seen my parents together, but whenever I visited my aunt in Karachi, she would always speak ill of my father and say, "Just stay in Karachi and leave your father." But I could never leave my father. He owned a lot of land and property, and there was no son to inherit it. All of it would come to me after him, so I could never leave him. My aunt always criticized my father, even going so far as to say that he was the one who had killed my mother. Hearing this, I would always scold her, saying, "No, no, that's not true. Why would my father kill my mother?" But my aunt would sigh deeply and say, "You don't know. When you were born, your father said that he would have preferred a son and didn't want a daughter." As soon as I heard my aunt's words, the love I had for my father started to fade. This is why I couldn't find peace in the village anymore. I kept thinking that my father's character seemed suspicious. I had always felt that my father's social circle, which included the feudal lords, wasn't good. They were all indulgent, pleasure-seeking people. As I thought about all this, my mind shifted to Rabia's condition, who was pregnant. I felt immense worry and confusion. Soon, I gathered information about Rabia's family and decided to visit her home. When I saw her parents, I was shocked. They immediately seated me and began offering me drinks and snacks. They treated me with such respect and were overly kind, bringing me fruits and drinks without any reason. As I glanced around their house, I noticed that it was furnished with everything one would need. Yet it was built out of mud. They said, "Your father has been so kind to us. He forgave us." Hearing this, I was struck dumb. I asked Rabia's mother, "What are you trying to say? Why don't you allow Rabia to come back?" Her mother, avoiding my gaze, started crying and said, "Forgive us. What could we do? My husband is at fault. He sold his daughter. My husband had a huge debt to your father. He was supposed to repay the debt by a certain date, but he kept gambling and losing. In the end, he made a deal and sold my daughter to your father." As soon as I heard this, it felt like someone had thrown me into a deep pit. What was I hearing? My father was involved in this? I never imagined this. I asked, "Aunt, tell me clearly, was my father also at fault?" She responded, "Yes, it was the master's fault. He was the one who kept the gamble going. On the other hand, your father was the one who kept gambling and lost to my husband. He was already in debt. So, in desperation, he sold my daughter to your father. I thought your father would refuse, but when he saw my young daughter, his intentions wavered, and he took her with him. I don't know what happened after that, but in exchange, your father made sure we had a better life. He provided all these machines and goods for us." I was in disbelief. "So you're saying my father took my sister away?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, he took her, and I'm very grateful to him for providing for us. But I never imagined that he would take my daughter." She started crying uncontrollably. I felt a rush of anger towards my father. I had to inform Rabia's mother about her pregnancy, but I feared that she might not be able to handle it. I quickly left their home and went back to the mansion. My head was spinning, and I was overwhelmed with emotions. The days of my return to the city were approaching, but I couldn't leave until I found the truth. I had to uncover my father's role in all of this. For the time being, I stayed in the village and made up an excuse to my father about how much I enjoyed the fresh air and how my health had improved. But deep inside, I was still tormented by the truth. One day, I gathered the courage and asked my father directly, "Father, how long will you keep hiding the truth from me?" He looked startled and asked, "What truth? What do you mean?" I replied, "The truth about the child. Whose is it?" I demanded. My father turned pale and said, "Don't get involved in this. Why do you need to know?" His reaction made my heart sink, but I didn't back down. I said, "If you don't tell me, I will make it public that the great feudal lord of this village," I paused before continuing, "sold a young, innocent girl." Before I could finish, my father snapped at me. "Shameless girl! How dare you speak to your father like this? Don't you ever speak like that again." His anger and harsh words left me shaken, but deep inside, I knew I was on the brink of uncovering the truth, no matter the cost. "If you say anything like this again, I will send you back to the city. I wanted to send you back earlier, but it was my mistake bringing you to the village," my father angrily said. I replied, "So now you want me to leave for the city just when I am discovering the truth? You want me to go so that I won't find out the whole truth? But remember, I will not leave until I know everything, and I will find out whose child is in Rabia's womb." Saying this, I quickly went to my room, feeling overwhelmed with rage. My aunt's words were echoing in my mind, and they all seemed to be true. I was burning with the desire to tell her everything, and I couldn't keep the truth to myself anymore. When I told my aunt everything, she immediately placed her hands on her ears, saying, "I'm still telling you, hurry back before your father's disgrace spreads throughout the whole village." But I replied, "I don't want to return so quickly. I need to know the full truth." That day, my father had gone to the fields, and I saw an opportunity. I quickly called Rabia to the mansion. She was on the stairs when I pushed her and grabbed her arm. Rabia screamed, but I said firmly, "If you don't tell me the truth about whose child this is, I will make sure this illegitimate existence is erased. Do you understand?" Rabia immediately responded, "I will tell you everything, but please save my life." I quickly pulled her back up and asked her to tell me the truth. When Rabia told me everything, it felt like my soul had frozen. The truth was horrific. As soon as my father took Rabia from her home, he immediately married her. My father had been visiting Rabia every night, subjecting her to cruelty. He mistreated her because her father had a debt to mine, and my father wanted to make him feel the pain of his mistake. Rabia suffered in silence, enduring the cruelty. But when my father learned that Rabia was ill, he took her to the hospital himself. Once the doctor confirmed that she was pregnant, he started taking care of her. That's why he had warned me not to make Rabia do any work. My father's behavior had shifted because he was excited about the child, his heir. He had even taunted me, saying, "Your mother only gave birth to a girl. I wish she had given birth to a son. Then I would have been in control." This broke my heart. Now, I understood why my father had been so harsh with me. He was anticipating the arrival of his son. I told Rabia, "Don't worry, you are blameless. You've been wronged, but my father will pay for his actions. I pray to Allah that he gets the punishment he deserves for the cruelty he has shown." I said these words from the depth of my heart and sent Rabia back. I no longer wanted to associate with my father. The very thought of him repulsed me. I felt like leaving for Karachi as soon as possible, but I knew my father was tormenting Rabia. Rabia's last month of pregnancy was nearing, and my father still showed no mercy toward her. Allah had given him the joy of expecting an heir, but he had forgotten this happiness in his pursuit of revenge on Rabia's father. He continued to torture Rabia, showing no compassion for her. Eventually, I decided to tell Rabia's parents the truth about her pregnancy, which they had no idea about. I also informed them about the marriage. My father had strictly warned Rabia not to reveal this secret. He was afraid that if this news spread in the village, everyone would know that he had married a minor, someone even younger than his daughter. To protect his image, he had threatened Rabia, saying, "If you tell anyone, I will kill you." That's why Rabia never spoke out. One day, when my father was out in the fields, I suddenly heard Rabia's screams. I rushed to her and found that her time had come. I quickly called a midwife, and as soon as Rabia gave birth, my father arrived. He was overjoyed, so much so that he shoved me aside and said, "Move aside, let me see my heir." In his excitement, he pushed me so hard that I collided with the wall and injured my head badly. The pain was intense, but I barely felt it as the shock of everything else overwhelmed me. My father asked the midwife, "Why didn't you bring the baby?" The midwife had come out, but there was a strange horror on her face. She looked terrified and said, "I can't bring it. You go inside and see for yourself." As soon as my father went in, a horrifying scream escaped his mouth, and I was frozen with fear. I was very anxious, wondering what had happened, but at that moment, I didn't have the strength to go inside because my head was spinning with pain, and I had been injured. At that moment, Rabia's mother arrived. She saw my injury and immediately began dressing my wounds, then took me to her room. That was why I didn't get to see the baby's face, but my father's screams still echoed in my ears. After some time, when I finally went outside, the entire house was in mourning. I quickly asked Rabia, "Rabia, what's going on? Show me too. I want to see the baby." Rabia, with a look of despair, said, "BBG, I gave birth to the baby, but the child's appearance is such that anyone who sees it will cover their ears in horror. They will say, 'Astagfirullah,' because the baby has 3 heads." When Rabia said this, my soul seemed to leave my body. I now understood why my father was bedridden. When my father heard the news and saw his child, he collapsed in shock. The whole village soon heard the news that the child was my father's. Everyone was whispering that my father had committed some terrible crime to deserve such a punishment. Now I understood the crime. My father had killed my mother because she had given birth to me, a daughter. If she had given birth to a son who could inherit his wealth, he would have treated that child like a king. But no, my mother's only sin was bringing a daughter into this world, and for that my father punished her by killing her. And now, fate had delivered the same punishment to him. God had sent him a child that became a lesson for everyone. That child died a few days later, and Rabia, along with her parents, returned to their home. As for my father, he lay in his bed, slowly fading away. He passed away quietly, never having seen the consequences of his actions. His wealth, the land, everything that had once been his was now mine. But despite inheriting it, I couldn't bear to stay in that house. I couldn't live in the place where my father's sins had left such a dark mark on my soul. I left the village and went to live with my aunt in Karachi, away from all the memories of that cursed place. I knew I would never return. The land, the wealth, the power, they no longer mattered to me. What mattered was that I had finally learned the truth about my father's character and the price of his actions. This story carries a profound moral lesson. No one can escape the consequences of their actions. My father, driven by greed and pride, committed unforgivable sins, believing that his wealth and power could shield him from accountability. But in the end, it was his own daughter, the very one he thought was a burden, who became the witness to his disgrace. Fate teaches that cruelty and injustice are never without consequences, and the cycle of harm always catches up with the wrongdoer. Moreover, it's a reminder that family should be a source of love and support, not manipulation and control. The abuse of power over others, especially those we should care for, leads to destruction, not only for the victims, but for the perpetrator as well. My father's life ended in ruin because of his own actions, and I learned that true power lies in kindness, integrity, and respect for others.